lesson. These are the lesson notes for lesson 4, albedo and the greenhouse effect, for March 27th, 2012. Today we are talking about the albedo and the greenhouse effect. Um, the other day we talked about the two things that happen to the sun's energy when it enters our atmosphere. One of them was it can be absorbed by the ocean and clouds and land. The other deals with how it can be reflected by the oceans, the atmosphere, the clouds, and land. Both of those things have to do with albedo and eventually potentially part of the greenhouse effect. Um, I did an experiment in class where I had a piece of black paper with a thermometer in it and a piece of white paper with a thermometer in it, and I had a heat lamp over the top of it. And we found out that the piece of paper with the black paper with the thermometer was about 3 to 5 degrees warmer than the piece of white paper. And that was due to something called albedo, the ability to absorb heat or the ability to reflect heat. The black had low albedo, greater chance or greater ability to absorb heat. The white had higher albedo, the greater ability to reflect heat. And that's kind of what it says right here in our notes. Now, if you want to read it, you go ahead and read it. And we put in our notes just the underlined portion, which is um, just the definition of albedo, and something that if it has high albedo, it reflects a lot of energy, and if it has low albedo, it absorbs a lot of energy. Like low albedo items tend to be darker in color, blacks and browns. Higher albedo tends to be white, clouds, snow, sand. Those are things that reflect a lot of, of the energies from the sun. And if you look at the map here, you can see up here we have snow and ice in the northern parts. And you notice also that those same areas have a high albedo. Now we did have this one area in Africa right here. If you look over here in Africa, they have the same high levels, but it's because it's desert, it's sand. So the albedo rating there is a lot higher. Now, when we talked about the greenhouse effect, it kind of works just like this greenhouse right here. Sunlight comes in, hits the surface, and tries to bounce back out, but the glass doesn't allow it to come back out, so it bounces right back down, and it keeps this area nice and warm. Um, our planet does the same thing. Now, if you go to page 520 and 521 in your textbook, which I hope you have at home, um, you can definitely read about this a little bit more in detail. Our notes just indicated that we do have these greenhouse gases, and in these greenhouse gases, water vapor and carbon dioxide and other gases, well, they absorb the heat, the clouds absorb the energy, and then they send it back in all directions, some back to the earth, some back into space. All these greenhouse gases, we need them because they do keep our planet heated. But just like anything, too many greenhouse gases are going to cause a problem. We're going to heat up too much. Too little, we're not going to heat up enough. So we do need some greenhouse gases, but we do make a lot of the greenhouse gases and we're getting to a point where we're making a little too many. What are some of those effects of having too many? Well, if you read on page 526 and 527, you're going to find out that we're looking at higher temperatures and other issues. Now, and the last thing that we talked about today was the difference between weather and climate. And even though this has a lot of information here, the main thing that we got out of here was weather is current conditions. Right now, right here, how much cloud cover, what's the precipitation, what's the humidity, what's the temperature in a given location in a short period of time. That's weather. Whereas climate, on the other hand, is exactly, well, not exactly opposite, but it is different. It's the weather conditions from season to season. It says form here, but it should say from season to season, year to year. Wisconsin's March climate tends to be colder, and we get quite a bit of snow. Well, that hasn't been the case this March because we've been in the 80s and 60s most days of the month, and we haven't had any snow, I don't believe. So climate is over time, what it's like over time. An example would be climate in the desert is usually warm and dry with clear skies. However, you still can get snow or rain in the desert. It's just climate is over time. I did mention in class that next week, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, we are going to have a test. And that test is going to include all 5 of these parts. We've talked about the atmosphere, layers of the atmosphere, air pressure. We did talk about the electromagnetic spectrum. Today we talked about albedo and the greenhouse effect. And tomorrow we're going to talk about how that heat just gets transferred from the atmosphere from one place to another in the atmosphere. So hopefully we're going to do well on that. I hope this works. I'm going to put this on my teacher page, and we'll see what happens.